This is what we're going to talk about. You see there's a lot going on. I've at least these 3 buzzword product names in the title already. So we do zeebe, Spring Boot, and Apache Camel, which is a bit of a problem because I only have 30 minutes. So you can do me a favor. Have you been here for the last 45 minutes? Okay. If you haven't, bear with me, come to me later, because I will not go into zeebe details again. I will not do anything about how this works. And I assume that you're not here to learn about Spring Boot as well, because at least from my perspective, it's 2018. It's usable, it's there, but I will not go into the details of Spring Boot. I will focus on these 2 highlighted projects I've been working on over the last year. This is spring-zeebe. I don't like to prove Bernd wrong, but he told in his demo that it doesn't run with Spring Boot. It does. And Camel-zeebe, which is my personal playground right now, connecting workers and zeebe in the cloud without having TCP connections, client stuff at all. Okay, and then of course, if you saw me before, I like live demos. I live on this thrill. Does it work? Does it not work? So I do a live demo, and afterwards we have time for conclusion and discussion and some questions. Okay, as I said, I will skip this. zeebe is the next generation workflow engine. It will come next year. It will be cool. I did some community projects on this already. They had a fluently changing API for the last 12 months. So I'm now on this 0.11.0, which was stable for, I don't know, 6 weeks or 8 weeks. A lot of the stuff they told you about is in the next snapshot version, and I didn't touch it because I learned from my mistakes in the past. Important for you to remember is that it relies on a broker and a client API. So we have one broker system running all the processes or the storage, and client connecting to this broker network. Okay, next thing, Spring Boot, or as I call it, Spring on steroids, has been around for, to look it up, not even here. So the latest version of Spring Boot is 2.05. Anybody uses Spring Boot here already for production? Someone, I guess, with a Camunda extension. So it's a really cool framework to build applications that are self-contained or at least self-executable. You have this opinionated approach, so they give you tools, and if you don't want to change it, it just works. And they have this starter concept, so you activate features just by putting a jar on the class path, and then it automatically configured and it runs. And we will use this later for the Camel and Spring Boot zeebe stuff. Okay, now we come to spring-zeebe. You can say no to Bernd. Bernd approached me last, I don't know, summer, and said, you did work on the Camunda Spring Boot, why don't you do a zeebe Spring Boot? And I said, challenge accepted. And besides all these API changes that they didn't tell me about, this was a relatively small issue. I now can, by annotating a Spring Boot application, I can run a broker and I can run a client application, which is really cool, is that I can do not the TOML or properties configuration from zeebe, but I can do Spring external configuration like YAML or environment properties. And I can do annotation-based subscriptions. So the client code we saw, instead of having annotation that reads from Kafka and then code that connects to the client, you can just subscribe to the broker directly, which then looks like, no, this is the example for the old code. So this is the main application, Java client for the broker. You see the obvious main application. You see that I somehow connect my client. You see that I have this job worker open. This is how I subscribe to a task, and somewhere in between, in this lambda expression, I get job client job, and I say hello world. And didn't change so much, but the concept is different. This is a Spring Boot main application. You see that I am now a Spring Boot application. I have the enable zeebe client annotation, which checks for application YAML properties and sets up a client. And I have this zeebe worker annotation on my actual business logic, which acts like a job worker in this zeebe context, but I don't really write the code. I just have some method annotated. I still have to do, and it's something I'd really like to discuss, at least with the core developers, I still have to do this client new complete command send and join, which from the Spring application perspective, I don't really want to do. I want to get, this is a payload you have to work on, this is a task you have to do, and we expect you to return some information to us, but we don't really want you to know about all this internal wiring. Okay, third product buzzword. Who is familiar with Apache Camel? Great, more than I expected, because I wasn't aware of Camel. I thought it was some old school legacy stuff that you do not use anymore because it's founded or first committed in 2007 already. But it's actually pretty cool software from what I found out over the past month, because it allows you to write routes. So you can just say, take something from here, do something with it, and put it there. So you would now, today, maybe say it's a stream. I think Spring Cloud streaming aims in the direction. This Kafka Connect sounded familiar when you think of Camel. And the cool stuff about Camel is because they have been around for quite a while, they have 200 plus, I've lost counting, I think it's 240 meanwhile, components that you can use in your application. So component might be, I want to read from an FTP server, or I want to do filter on a JSON message, or I want to publish to a Kafka topic. This is all already there, so I can just use it and via my application in a route where I just say this should happen, and then once an event occurs or some file is reached or a message arrives on a topic, this route is processed. And yeah, as I already mentioned, transport protocol is not so important for if you work with Camel. So I today will read from a file system, I could read from Kafka topic, I could, I don't know, whatever they support. This is a lot smaller than I expected. I hope you can see it. This is just an overview of a Camel system. So the upper left box is the system you write. So you do run a Camel context, you do the wiring, you set up the routes. The down part are the components, so endpoints of the system, your connection to the outside world. They translate whatever happens outside your Camel system to what do you do inside the Camel system. So for example, in the leftmost corner, we read or write to a database. With the Firefox, we can access HTTP or REST endpoints. And in the upper right, you see these are enterprise integration patterns from the book Bernd already mentioned this morning, which Camel implements. So you have filter, routing, dispatching, content enrichment. There are a few patterns. This book is really big and worth reading. Okay. Because in the live demo I will have some code, I just go through some vocabulary. So later you cannot say that you never heard the term before, because I now tell it to you once. I don't expect that you remember everything, it's just setting up the stage. So from the outside perspective, I write a component. A component is identified, in this case, zeebe, colon. This puts up a namespace, so when I write in my Camel route, I say zeebe, colon. I tell the system, I want to do stuff with zeebe. If I tell them file, colon, file system, and so on. And this component then scans the rest, so after the colon slashes, and identifies which endpoint do I want to use. So in this case, obviously I'm telling zeebe that I want to start a process, and zeebe is then a factory and will provide me with an endpoint. This is Camel terminology. An endpoint is a consumer or producer. Took me quite a while to understand that this is the other way around that you would normally think, because it's a consumer from the outside world and puts it into your Camel route, and a producer to the outside world. So not a producer starts your route, a consumer starts your route. Okay, route is explained, it's data flow, so you describe what your system does with data coming in and how data goes out. And the abstraction Camel uses internally because, as you can imagine, this is highly generic. If I work with file system and Kafka and JSON and whatsoever, the abstraction is like a letter. So you have a message in an exchange, and the message itself has a header on the body. We will have to make use of this later to get the system working. And an example for a route like this, you read from ActiveMQ, you write to FTP, and in between you do some processing and you write CSV. As you can see, it's an old system. It supports CSV. And it's also interesting, this bean you can integrate with Spring or Spring Boot because this is a processor that just gets injected and is used. Okay, this was very quick, but this was all the theoretical ground we need. Now we can go on to the fun part. It's Camel zeebe. This is actually work in progress. Motivation was an ex-colleague of mine, Malte. He built in AWS, Amazon, some external worker, Camunda, through, what is this protocol, simple notification system, Amazon SNS. And I was working on Spring Boot zeebe, and it said, this is cool, I want to do it myself, but for zeebe, and found out that this is still the 0.11 version. They are working on a better approach, but until now, the client has to know the host and the port of the broker, or all brokers, if you think of a network, which means that I didn't find a way to run it on one node and another node and tell some cloud environment that I want to connect to a port on another system. So I needed an approach where the worker itself knows what it should do. So I have a worker that can fulfill a certain task, but it does not have to know where the broker is and how the zeebe client stuff works. And I could have done it just for SNS, but when Simon told me about Camel, I said, okay, let's do it with Camel, because then we solved SNS and Kafka and Rabbit and everything just with one approach. What I built up to now is an API and these components we need. So I have zeebe : to work with the zeebe client API, and I have an immutable API abstracted from that that I can use in workers, so they can communicate with the system without having to know or speak zeebe. There are quite a few, but I think for a start enough use cases I support. So a worker can register, a worker can receive job notifications, work on them, and complete them. I have no failover so far. I just have to work. But it's a live demo, so it will work. What does it look like? This is Kotlin now. I have an immutable start process command, which in my case now just takes the ID of the process I want to start, and optional, that's the question mark behind JSON, optional payload to start the process with. So I do not do topic client, new process client, new workflow with payload and send and join. I do just please start. And on the other side, close to the broker, because obviously somewhere we have to do this connection via TCP. I have a core component that receives commands from the outside world and via endpoint translates them to the zeebe client, which then looks like this. This is an endpoint. You can see I create a producer. If you remember, now it all makes sense to hear these words. A producer is at the end of a route and talks to the outside world. In this case, the outside world is a zeebe broker. So this component becomes a zeebe client and says, I received a start process command. I translate it in this fluent API language you understand, and I do a send and join, and then the broker will start a process for me. Okay. You're not really look confused, so I just go on, okay? I double check now because, yeah. Okay, who was here last time when Daniel presented the first ever live demo with zeebe, with the zeebe face spam example? Cool, then I have really new spectators for this. So they came up with, we are working on this new thing. It was, I don't know, '01, not even '01, I can't remember, last year. We have this very complicated task. So if you look at the process, we put an image in, and we have a two-step process. We want to add a watermark, and we want to shrink it to a thumbnail, maybe to use it in an image gallery. And thank God now we have the technology to do this, because before it was using Photoshop or using Image Magic or some other editor, and now we have a really cloud-based system to do this. This is work in progress. It's actually on our Holunder, so Holisticon plus Camunda equals Holunder GitHub account. And yeah, if you wonder why it's called face spam, I don't know. And I asked the guys who voted last year, and they said they don't know. Because they just needed a name, and it was face spam. Not my first choice. Okay, let's have a look at how this system is built. You might recognize a lot of these components from what Bernd already showed, because it's a zeebe distributed broker-worker environment, and there's nothing you can do about some concepts behind it. So from, if I'm on the left side, the guy with the sunglasses is the internal operator. This is the one who knows that there will be an image processing process with two steps, and so he is the process owner of this process. He knows which workers have to be built, and he talks to this orchestrator. So this pink bubble, I'm not sure if you can read it, it's the orchestrator. And the orchestrator keeps all this process-specific information and tools, and is the only one in this whole cloud who is able to talk to the broker. And obviously we need two workers, because the task is too complex for a single worker. We have one watermarker and one thumbnailer. And those components just were built to do exactly this. Get an image, place a watermark on it, return it, or shrink it and return it. They, as you can see with this yellow square, they don't know that they're running in a zeebe context at all. The only thing they know is this minimal, immutable Camel API, so I can tell them that there is a job they should do. And they know about the complete command, so they can tell me that they are finished. But they are not involved in all this connect and client broker stuff. The orchestrator itself knows both, of course, talking to the broker and talking to the workers. From a dynamic view, we put numbers to it, but you cannot see them at all, right? Ah, yeah. So the zero stuff is setting up, so the workers register on the orchestrator and say, hi, I'm the watermarker, hi, I'm the thumbnailer, we are there, we can start working. And upper left, I can point it here, I think. This is what starts the whole thing. Our cloud environment receives an image. The image is read by the orchestrator, and it says, okay, I start an image processing process, and I know that the first step is to inform the watermarker, so I put a job message to his inbox, which normally would be a topic and some messaging infrastructure. On my machine, it's a file in the directory, so the inboxes are just folders. Then the watermarker says, okay, I can work with this, reads the image from the work directory and puts a new image watermarked and tells the orchestrator, I'm done, and the orchestrator then knows, because it follows the process, that now the thumbnailer has to do some work, and we will see this as well. Okay, now for the fun part. We will see if this is really working, and I was not just promising you something. Ja, Zoom, das sagst du so leicht. Okay, this is Zoom. Yes, we don't need. So first thing I do to set the system up, I start the orchestrator. Okay, this is one thing I forgot to mention about Spring Boot. Maybe the coolest feature, you can put banners in your application, and when you run them on the console, you get this, I'm the zeebe broker. As you can see in the application below, this is what I'm running now. I have the enable client annotation, and because we can, the enable broker application on the same Spring application. For my demo, orchestrator and broker are just one unit now. They still communicate via TCP, but I want to limit the applications I have to run for this example. Besides that, there's nothing inside because all the configuration is either default, convention over configuration, or put in a YAML file, so you will never see some I do new broker start, or I say client builder, impl do stuff. This is everything needed and it runs. Okay. Then we can see here, it has some inboxes, so it set up a complex cloud infrastructure with a lot of routes and in and out boxes. And we see there are no deployed processes, which is bad because we want to run a process. So I'm now going to deploy a process, which is a challenging task because I have to get the, yeah, okay. This is my cloud API infrastructure. So here I can see which applications are running and what they are doing, and I want to deploy a process. So I take the orchestrator, and I have a process prepared, and I, wait, move it there. Yes, I will. So you saw it disappearing right away, it's magic. It now appears here. So there's a deployed process. Why? Because I have a route configured in the Camel system that says when you receive a BPMN file from your inbox, you read it and create, this is this from file to deploy command, so you process it, you read the BPMN file, you prepare a deploy process command, and you send this to the process deploy endpoint, which is coming from this Camel zeebe. So now we have a process. And now I can start a process. Wait a second, I forgot to. This is the monitor you already saw in Bernd's presentation. I now have I made a joke yesterday evening. When you use a MongoDB, you lose your data. This is period and final and so I just set up a new MongoDB and I restart the monitor. But this is supposed to happen, right? I mean, otherwise you won't believe me and you think I just have a click dummy. This is live. Okay, running again, checking again. No effect whatsoever. Aha, okay. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, now we start a process. Our cloud has an inbox. It says if you want something done, put it in here, and I take an image. Which one? Let's check it first. This is Jakob yesterday. I wanted to start with, yeah, the CamundaCon, my picture when I arrived here. And we place it place it, copy and paste it. Perfect. This is, okay, then the hard way. I go to my zeebe Camel FaceBam project. I go to the demo folder. This is 2018, and this is how you move a file on a Mac. And I move it to the inbox, cloud inbox. Thank you. Wow. Okay. So what you see up here is there's a lot of going on. I'm subscribing to this event flow, so everything that Bernd, that with Connect now just logs out here, but we don't have to check it. We can just check the monitor. Yay. Okay, now we have a worker, we have a process instance running, we want a watermark, but we have no workers because I didn't even start the workers, so we start with the watermarker. Again, yeah, FaceBam watermarker. And so it worked on the image before, and this is really something that's maybe different from other approaches you saw today or will see in the future. How did the worker register? It sent, how much time do I have? Anyone? 2 minutes. Do you want to invest 10 minutes of your coffee break? Okay, I have to skip all this. It sends a registration and it tells dynamic to which endpoint route it has to send the jobs. So the worker itself decides where to and in which format and everything it wants to receive these messages. In this case, it came to his file inbox. And just to see that the watermark is working, I will also start the thumbnailer. And I prepared another microservice. Wait a second. Yep. There it is. This is Camel zeebe FaceBam. So now we have this image gallery, and I will just push my luck with 2 minutes because this is prepared. You tell me, was it cool or what? But wait, there's more. This more is really cool, so we have to do it now. Please take a picture and mail it to this address. No worries, I won't even keep the picture or your address, anything. If you want to be spent by me, you can come to me directly afterwards. And I now, while you're taking pictures, you don't have to take pictures of me, you can... Sorry. Yeah, this is complicated now. Okay. This is the address. Then first take your pictures, and then we go on. 5 seconds.
People have to hurry up to send the mail. We'll already come to you. So there's also the possibility to ask some questions. You can also use the app to quickly ask a question.
Just a second. It's half the fun when the client is not watching for the mails. So play. Yeah, now the FaceBam, the client starts, and its job is to read your images of course, via Camel from this Gmail box and start processes by receiving them, putting them to the process, starting the watermarker, starting the thumbnailer, and activating this cool microservice gallery we have.
Nice. So while this is running,
Yeah.
maybe we can take some questions meanwhile. So thanks a lot for the presentation. Very nice. Unfortunately, it was
Yeah.
a bit late. That's why. Was mostly the 5 minutes that we lost at the beginning because of the adapter. That's why we run a little bit over time, but I guess that's fine. So there was one question regarding why did you choose Camel and not something else, like Apache NiFi or so?
Like what?
Apache NiFi was one of the...
Oh, that's easy to answer because I didn't know about this.
Okay.
I had my friend Simon, he was working with Camel, and he showed me what he did, and I said, this is cool, that will solve my problem. I just said, oh, go. So
Yeah,
this one...
good. Works. And you said it's a good software, even though it's relatively old, right? We saw the
Yeah,
first
but
commit.
it's stable. Right?
Stable
Yeah.
and still used a lot, as we have seen also in the audience. It's nice. Are there any more questions in the audience at the moment? And we can have some microphones as well.
No
questions
images coming
at the
in.
moment. No pictures at the moment. Okay, that's a good sign.
So it's not because the inbox is not fully filled. It's maybe because I have to copy the...
So there was one question that is more regarding zeebe. Maybe I can take that. So how do you handle token movement with change payload? And the second one is how do you compensate earlier executions? The second question first, so how do you handle compensation? Eventually we're going to have a compensation event that is implemented in zeebe as well, right? There's this compensate event that you can use and attach to boundary events to tasks. So this is how we could compensate tasks that have been executed earlier. How are we handling payload? So if the payload changes in zeebe, you can choose more or less what you do. When we complete a task, you can send in payload, and then you can merge the data, or you can also replace existing payload that was already there. Hope that answers the question. So let's see if that imaging works.
It will,
The
of
last
course,
thing.
it's, as always, security.
We have still a minute, so no pressure.
Whoever invented that is, yeah.
But I think it's really, really nice to see what you can now combine with zeebe as well, right?
Yeah,
So
of course you don't want to do thumbnails all the time, but this approach that putting a file somewhere starts a route and then triggers a process. I think this could be really useful for office processing stuff, where you get a lot of emails or you get whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, finally.
Okay. Perfect. So more emails are coming. That's great.
It should be self-refreshing with the HTTP refresh tag. So
perfect.
Yeah.
So as you can see, the whole demo works. Thanks a lot for your time, for
thank you.
presenting.